it's hard, right? When you've got an idea for a product that no one else thinks is needed, that is really, really difficult. And what I believed was that and so no matter what industry you're in, when you're developing a new category, that is really, really difficult because one of the things that I share in the book as well is if you think too much about the end, you'll never get past the beginning. So that, so
Welcome back to another episode of the Being Yourself show, where world's renowned thought leaders and best-selling authors share their wisdom and insight with you so that you can achieve your goals and be a better version of yourself. If you're new to this channel, then you may consider subscribing. I'm your host, Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is a founder of a billion-dollar company that makes flavored water. She has been listed in Huffington Post's top 6 disruptors. The list also includes Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. She has been named one of the InStyle's Badass 50. Fast Company says that she's the most creative people in business, and she's also Fortune's most powerful women entrepreneur. And most importantly, she has written down her journey in the book on how she started from the tech career that she initially had, built a company, took it to make it a billion-dollar firm. So please welcome the globally sought-after speaker, a super successful entrepreneur, and a best-selling author of the book Undaunted, Kara Goldin.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
So, Kara, you've been so super successful. You may continue acquiring businesses and grow. Why did you write a book?
Well, the book was my journal, and it's starting almost 6 years ago now. I started just writing down notes, and it really came from that Q&A at the end of some of the panels that I was doing, where there would be audience questions. They would ask me different things like, how did you decide to take the risk to go and start a company? Or how did you get over your fears? Why did you leave tech in order to go out and start a beverage company? And all these things that I had really never they weren't my questions, right? They were questions that I think other people had, because frankly, it was a little strange for people to see that somebody would go from one industry and doing okay in that industry and go kind of back down to the bottom again and start to learn again. And as I was writing everything down, I started to think that there's probably a lot of other people out there who aren't going to the places that I'm speaking, and maybe I could publish my notes more than anything. I didn't even think about writing a book, and I asked a friend of mine how I would publish my notes and get it out to people, and she said, "You mean write a book?" And I said, "Oh, that's daunting. There's no way I could write a book. I mean, I'm busy. I'm running a company, and so little did I know that pretty soon I would be putting a manuscript together and getting it all together to get it out there. So that's how Undaunted was born.
I'm so glad that your friend advised you to do that, because of that, there are so many people who learn the steps that what it takes to make a company such a big brand and household name. Really, Hint is everywhere.
Thank
right?
you.
So you were in Starbucks and now you're in the retail stores. So you're everywhere. I wanted to know, how did you, I mean, you've written about it in detail in the book, how to, stop your kind of overcome your doubts plus doubters. But when you were just starting, and then people will be like, why another flavored water? There is vitamin water, right? You mentioned about it in the book as well. So what was your first reaction when people asked those of course, you responded to them with your actions and we can all see the result. But what was your first reaction when somebody is talking to you and they're kind of belittling your product? How did you react in that moment?
Well, I never thought about this product as a competitor to a vitamin water or another water. For me,
Mm,
it was really a discovery that I had made in my kitchen by making this product at home to help me drink water. So, Hint is an unsweetened flavored water, which means that it doesn't have diet sweeteners in it, it doesn't have regular sugar in it, and it doesn't have a lot of other stuff in it. Too, I had never really realized what I had been putting into my own body. I'd been drinking diet soda for years, Diet Coke in particular, thinking that I was doing better because it was diet. And when I looked at the ingredients one day, purely by accident, 17 years ago, that's when I thought, I really shouldn't put this in my system. I
mm,
think I was early versus the way that no one around me, at least that I knew, was really thinking the way that I was thinking. So maybe call me a visionary entrepreneur, which sounds great, but it's hard, right? When you've got an idea for a product that no one else thinks is needed, that is really, really difficult. And what I believed was that there were a lot of other people like me who were drinking things that were healthy perception versus healthy reality,
mm,
that they would soon realize that they should stop drinking them. Maybe they would look at the ingredients. Maybe they would also have health issues, as I did. I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of many years, not ever connecting the dots to think that it was the diet sweeteners. But when I gave up diet sweeteners, and really diet soda was the only thing that I was drinking, and the only diet sweeteners that I was really putting in my system, that's when lots of amazing things happened to me. In 2.5 weeks, I lost 24 pounds after giving up diet soda.
mhm,
I had cleared up some adult acne that I had on my skin that was, definitely my system on overload. That was, trying to clean things out, and it was coming out on my skin. And I think for me, it was such a different product than what was out there. I mean, no one was doing an unsweetened flavored water. So I knew that when I finally got it on the shelf, I knew that I was developing a new product in a new company. But what I didn't know was that I was developing an entirely new category. And so, no matter what industry you're in, when you're developing a new category, that is really, really difficult because you not only maybe have to convince the buyer who has to make the decision as to whether or not to put your product on the shelf based on what they think consumers want, but you also have to explain to the consumer, right? Because maybe you'll get trial out of people, you'll figure out ways to do it, but you have to actually get people to understand that they want it. And I think in the beverage industry, you do that by creating a product that tastes great, but
mm,
also, you've got to be able to. What I found was the most useful was sharing my own story. Like, why did I do this? I didn't do this because I wanted to go head to head with the beverage industry or vitamin water or big sugar or whatever. For me, I wanted to help people. And so remember 17 years ago, no one was talking about mission-based companies. I mean, it
mm,
was it was really, for me, I just thought it would be such a great thing, even if it fails, to be able to create a product that could actually help people and help people like it had helped me. So that's the way I thought about it. But I maybe in some ways looking at other entrepreneurs that I had worked for. I was at America Online, had worked not directly, but underneath Steve Case, and even time before that, I worked at CNN under Ted Turner's leadership. So, again, those were all companies that were not what they are today, right? And were much, much smaller, were just getting started. And I think being able to have that experience really helped me to be able to go and do my own.
Out of curiosity, Kara, the content of the diet soda, are they still the same 17 years later, or they have improved in some ways?
Actually, it's interesting. When I started Hint, the diet drinks were about 10 calories. They hadn't mastered the zero
Okay.
calorie initiative. And so really, as they started um, to master that 0 calories, it's interesting. They figured out, the scientists behind making the calorie count go down, figured out how to actually make the product sweeter. So what they haven't taken into account, and I think consumers aren't really able to kind of differentiate, is that the brain doesn't necessarily read calories. What they do is they read sweetness. So what happens inside your body when you have a diet sweetener that is significantly sweeter? So in my case, I started drinking diet soda when I was a teenager, significantly many years ago. And the product today is significantly sweeter. So if you think about, as I start to drink more and more of the soda and why I ultimately gained weight, it started to make sense to me that the insulin that was being produced was actually my brain saying that that's what needs to happen. And that ended up causing me to gain weight and not being able to process these sweeteners, this insulin as well. So I think that, the tragedy that has gone on for the last 20 years now, really 17 years, I started to kind of get focused in on it with Hint, was that there were people writing to us early on who were sharing their stories about this disease called type 2 diabetes, which in the US was about 2% of the population, maybe even a little less than that. Today, 40 to 45% of the population has this disease called type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. And throughout the world, I mean, it's become, an epidemic. I mean, it's really it's a tragedy where, we're getting to a point where people are not actually getting the insulin that they need. They don't know that they have diabetes. Weight gain is kind of a typical response, or can be a typical response to type 2 diabetes. So it's really scary. And obviously with the pandemic, I mean, today, if you're going into the hospital with some variation of COVID and you've got an underlying condition, it's just not good. Right. And so I think people need to wake up and actually realize not only the ingredients that they're putting into their body, but how their own body is processing these things, like sweeteners. And I think that today, more and more people, like I said, are realizing just that they need to understand what they're putting into their system. But I still think that diet sweeteners to most people seem healthier and better for you than regular sugar.
I think in that case, the companies such as yours and other companies who are not doing the right thing play an important role, because when I go to the supermarket and I try to look at the what is the ingredient of any product, really, I mean, anything, you just take pasta, which has nothing in it. It looks like it's just pasta, and you see there is a section sugar and there is some grams in it, right? So everything in the supermarket has some sort of sugar. Some have written it in such a small font that you have to click a picture and zoom the picture to see exactly how much sugar they have put it in. So it's really difficult to find such a product which can really give people just health and nothing else. But that's a different long discussion, I think, in the health area.
No, it's an important one though. And I think that that's something that, more and more people, more than anything, I think that we've had many people say to us, just by having, they would start drinking Hint because they were trying to move away from diet sweeteners, because they figured that, I mean, it's interesting. Many doctors still to this day will actually tell diabetic patients that they can have diet sweeteners. Yet there are some diabetics who are saying actually it still was spiking my sugar levels inside my
Mm.
body. And again, that varies by individual. But many of these people then would start to just drink plain water. But like me, they were bored with plain water. And so they wouldn't drink it. And so when they found a product like Hint, it really gave them the opportunity to know that they could, right? They could survive. It was a really great product. And the number of people that I've heard that story from, they think they're the only ones, right? Reaching out to me saying that, oh gosh, your product has really saved me. It's helped me to get healthier. It's helped me to, not only get through this disease, but also in some cases get rid of it. And so we became the largest drink in Silicon Valley over the years inside of initially Google, Facebook, many other companies. And I mean, people would reach out to us and say, I had no idea until I started drinking Hint how much I was actually hurting myself. And so creating a product that actually helps people, um, you know, is just a very powerful thing.
Very powerful. And probably you didn't even guess that you would be transforming millions of lives by this product just because you were at that point addicted to diet soda and you didn't like water. So
Totally.
that those two small things actually gave you a reason, a calling, a sort of why, right? They gave you a personal path. But when you look at the people around, like every normal people, right, who are living a normal life, right, going to work, coming home, happy family, everything is okay, just everything is normal. And there are majority of the world is like that people they are struggling to find that calling, that purpose, that why, and they realize it sometime later in their life, like let's say in 40s and 50s, that what's my purpose? What should I do? Something that will transform the world in some way or form. So I wanted to know your views on this. Like you had an incident, and a lot of people will have some experiences, and based on that, they will find a purpose. Okay, I have to resolve this issue, right? Somebody had an accident. Okay, I have to do something on the roads or traffic lights or whatever, right? The people who don't have those sort of extreme experiences, but they're still searching, what should I be doing? What's my why? Is there any advice that you can give to those people?
I think searching for your why is often very difficult for people. And I think I didn't stop and sit there and think, I'm going to go find my why. There are people who do that and accomplish that. But I think often actually just taking time and figuring out what you enjoy doing, figuring out what you're interested in, something I often speak of when I'm speaking on college campuses or at business schools. I speak about the fact that sometimes just by stumbling upon your everyday life, that you find something that you're interested in that maybe a few years ago you couldn't imagine that you would be interested in.
Hmm.
I definitely, when I was in college, the story was never when you graduate, you'll have 3 or 4 different careers in different industries, right? And you think instead maybe you're graduating with as an engineer and you're going to be an engineer for the rest of your life. I think most people, especially people who are the most interesting people to me, are ones that had a totally different career than one that they graduated with, right? And they're trying to go back down to the bottom again and start over again because they're learning. And just because you are uh, climbing the ladder and managing lots of people along the way doesn't mean that you have to keep going up and keep going in that direction. Especially when things are going right. As I said to people, I kept saying to myself, especially during the challenging times in the early moments, that if I did fail along the way, if I did have challenges, that I could always go back to tech, right? I had been successful there. It's what the heck? If nothing else, I'd be a great dinner conversation to tell people what I had been doing for the last couple of years. But I think that there's always this confusion too, to look for something that you're passionate about and something that I didn't understand the beverage industry. I had never experienced anything in the beverage industry. But for me, health became really important when I started having children. And I
Mm.
wanted to understand what I was putting into their bodies. And so that's when I started to educate myself on this. And again, uh, it could be health, it could be food, it could be something totally different that you just become very, very interested in. And I think everybody should start to learn more and more. In fact, I believe that the happiest people today are the ones that are constantly learning and sort of putting themselves back down to the bottom of things to go out and learn, something totally new that they didn't understand, 5 years ago. Maybe it's photography, maybe it's cars, maybe it's computers. All of those things are things that help our brains to actually become stronger as well. But I think that the more we challenge ourselves, the more opportunities we have to meet more people that are interesting to us, that we're in a situation where we're not always mentoring just because we're getting older. Instead, we can be in the room with people that are more knowledgeable than we are, and become students again. And I think that that's something that everybody should wrap their head around.
Yeah, and I was just checking, flipping in the pages of your book. You have written a chapter on is just get started. That's also really very important. So, while you're keeping learning, and start doing some implementation also, right? You may
Absolutely.
find something. Mm.
Yeah. And I think often I say, like, the more educated you are, I think the harder that is for you to get started, because you come up with a million reasons why you can't, or most people do. And I think that it's important to write, a mini business plan or start to do your own research. But the thing that I found is that you'll find plenty of people who will tell you that something is a stupid idea, right? That you shouldn't do that because it doesn't make any sense. And especially the people that you would ask because you trust them, your friends and family. Those are the people that they don't want you to take risks. Why would you take risks? You
Mm.
seem very happy. And you make me happier because you're happy. And I think that that is the challenge, that you have to make these decisions on your own. And I always find that if you're if you're making little steps along the way, you're taking little risks, eventually you'll start to figure out on your own whether or not it's worth doing or not.
And you touched upon the stories about your kids. And Kara, you have 4 kids, right? And when the idea of Hint came, so I read it in the book, you were like, you just got the news that you're pregnant with your third child. Was it third child?
Fourth child.
Fourth child.
Yeah.
And by the time you were 9 months pregnant, you literally launched the company, isn't it? Right. So the birth of Hint happened with the birth of your fourth child, really.
It
At,
did.
at that time, generally with the mothers, they have so much of mood swings and they need to take a lot of rest and all the rest of it, right? That's all we know about the pregnancy period. But you actually created a billion-dollar company in that period. How did you keep yourself energized in those times? And how did you stay so super hyper productive?
Well, I think for me, I wanted to take a little bit of time off once I had my son. And I was definitely thinking, okay, if I got it on the shelf, then I would be able to do that. So in many ways, I had a goal that I was going to launch. I thought that there was a chance that it would slip when I did not get my product on time. In order to make that happen, it actually came the day before, and was taking up a parking space in my garage in San Francisco. And I had 2 cars. And while I wasn't going to be in the hospital, one of the cars was going to have to be jockeying around the block, street parking. And I thought, it's going to get towed for sure if I don't figure out how to get this product out. So again, being able to have these mini goals along the way. And again, I was just learning constantly. I was constantly on the phone trying to achieve something prior to my son being born. So in many ways, I think it helped me to have that overall goal. But again, I one of the things that I share in the book as well is if you think too much about the end, you'll never get past the beginning. So
Mm.
that so many people, including myself, thought, what am I doing? I'm pregnant. Why, you know, I shouldn't be doing this right now. And if you share that with people, everyone will agree with you. It's crazy that you're doing this at this point. But instead, it's a lot of fun and you're learning along the way and you're making great steps. And I think in many ways, when we got the product on the shelf at Whole Foods in San Francisco, the fact that I was pregnant and the person who was stocking the shelves thought it was crazy that I was about to deliver a baby. In fact, the day that I was delivering my son, the gentleman at Whole Foods said to me, "Are you going to deliver the baby in the store because you look incredibly pregnant?" And I said, "Gosh, I sure hope not. But maybe we should get it on the shelf and I should get out of here just to make sure that that doesn't happen."
But really, it's commendable the kind of productivity that you have shown over the years with 4 kids. It's one kid is enough for many couples, I know, right? But with 4 and building a company, creating a new category, as you said, right? It is really a daunting task. That's the name of the.
Thank you. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and they've had different summer internships with Hint along the way too, and
Interesting.
they've learned quite a bit. One of the chapters in the book that I write about is my son Keenan,
Mm.
who's now 20 years old, and it was when Keenan was 12. He said to me, "Mom, I didn't realize that women are not CEOs." And I thought, oh, now I have to have this conversation with him. And then the next day he said, "Why is that?" "Because you've done a great job. I've never really thought about that. I didn't know that there was not as many women who were CEOs as men." And he said, "It just doesn't make sense to me. You've done a great job." And I thought at that moment that just actually living and doing what I do and being a role model, not just for him, but also for mothers, is really, really powerful. I didn't start the company in order to, you know, do that, right? In fact, I had many guilty days along the way where I thought maybe I shouldn't be working, maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But then when he actually said this to me, what I realized is that he was able to see his own mom be a CEO of a company. He was able to see a, you know, woman who potentially he would go and work for one day, being someone that he would enjoy bouncing ideas off of. And so really, really powerful moment at that point that I decided to jot down some notes on and write a chapter on.
So I mean, I did talk a lot about productivity also on this channel because that's something I personally want to improve, and I help. I think that people, if they're more productive, then they can create such an innovative product such as yours. And out of curiosity, when you were to manage 4 kids and the business, how did your day look like? Like what time you were waking up and how you're dealing with the kids and the company?
Yeah, well, I often would get up and still to this day get up very early, typically around 5 a.m. And I found like that was sort of my quiet time, and often would tiptoe around the house so no one would hear me while I was getting some early morning things done. And I was lucky to be able to have help in the house so that somebody could actually help me, especially when things got chaotic when the kids were having breakfast. I wanted to be around, you know, for when they were having breakfast and getting them off to school. But I also found that those early morning hours was when I actually had time to go and get exercise in, which I think is something that I've created a habit out of over the years where I get that exercise in no matter what. And I find like it really sets my brain in the right mode. I think about what I have in front of me for the day. So getting the kids off to school, And then obviously as they got older, they didn't want me to walk them to school anymore and take them to school when they were driving. But it was, that I think was, the early years. I think as they grew and as they got older, and still to this day, I think being able to talk to me about business, being able to speak with me about some of the challenges that we've had along the way, whether it's fundraising or supply chain or managing through COVID, and all of those things. I think that they've been able to kind of get a front seat to being able to see how a startup, being able to see how a founder and CEO is able to weather those storms.
Whether that storms and how to remain undaunted. And that's one thing I wanted to ask your opinion once again, that how one can remain undaunted in such a fast changing and uncertain world where everyday events like the news you see, the stock market and industries are falling, things like that. How do you keep moving when you have like all of these things coming against you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic was definitely something that was quite different in many ways, but I think it over, my own journey and the history, 2008, 2009, weathering that storm, the financial crisis was quite a moment. I share a little bit more about that in the book. The manuscript was actually turned in prior to the pandemic. So I probably have another book of sort of weathering, the new storms along the way. But again, I think, I don't know, maybe with age, like the journey becomes one where you just have to keep moving forward, right? I've learned that complacency is not the answer. That doesn't mean that you can't slow down along the way, but actually stopping and not moving forward is a problem. And no matter what the situation is, you have to figure out, how do I continue to move forward in some way, even if it's taking small steps, even if it's going in a different direction. And I think that that is something, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what role you're in your life, you have to figure out how to move forward.
Sometimes it is not very easy.
Right. But I think that that's the problem, is that for so many people, is that, when you freeze up, when you have a hard time, and I think that that's the thing that I've learned too, is being able to have habits in your life, like whether that's for me, uh, it's hiking. I'm a huge proponent to move to a place where you feel like you have those opportunities as well. And I think many people took advantage of that during the last couple of years too, to figure out where they really wanted to be, not just be in a place for their jobs, because so many people are able to work remotely now. So I think that that's an important piece as well. Where do you find yourself to be more productive, where your mind can actually explore other things and learn things, where you feel like you're really able to kind of maximize who you're supposed to be?
Right. I was just looking behind me. There is this book about habits, and I totally agree with you. Uh, it does take time to build new habits, but once you have built them, they kind of become non-negotiable tools. Such as you said, your morning exercise routine and all those things, that they add so much value to your life in a longer term. That's so true.
Absolutely. And reading as well. I mean, you obviously are a huge reader too. I think that whether it's reading or listening to books as well, I think constantly looking for things that I sort of rotate between stories and also business books where I'm going to learn new things.
Mhm.
And I'm constantly looking to not just learn from my own industry too, that's something else that I chat about frequently, which is that so often, especially the large companies, if you've grown up inside of large company, you're constantly looking at your own industry. Maybe you're looking at innovators that have kind of changed your own industry, but you're not really looking outside of your industry to see what other types of innovation are there, what other types of tools are being used in those industries that maybe you can bring into your own industry. So those are also things that I think about a lot. And definitely we've changed quite a bit in the beverage industry. We were not only created a new, as I mentioned, product and company and new category, but also created a way to actually produce a product with no preservatives in it. No one was actually producing a water product that used fruit in
Mm.
the product with no preservatives, and so many things along the way that, we've really, really tackled, thinking about ways to use less plastic, for example, in our bottles. Things like taking the liners out of the caps, which are not actually recyclable. The liners are not. So many people, I didn't know that as a consumer. And when I started to look at things like that, I started to ask the question that I think is so important for everyone to ask: why? And most people working in industries, what I've found is that, especially in the beverage industry, they didn't have the answer. They didn't know why. And so I was coming in from a different industry, just curious and asking these questions. And the response was just because. And I always learned from my parents when they would say just because, I would have to keep probing, right?
Right.
I would keep asking until I would get to the answer. And yet, as we grow older, as we become more professional, we don't
Stop.
ask
You stop asking.
why,
Mm.
right? We stop asking. We assume that, oh, the answer is just because. But
Mhm.
again, I encourage people to stay with your curiosity and get to the bottom of it. And frankly, I think that's what tech taught me, right? That tech has they don't have a roadmap of uh, I should say a stopgap, right? On things. I felt like growing up in the tech industry in many ways allowed me to be able to follow the curiosity, follow the road. There were so many people in tech that I met along the way that uh, really were sure that they didn't have all the answers, and that they were humbled by the fact that it was out there and they were trying to get there, but they assumed that somebody would eventually, and hopefully it was going to be them or someone else, right? And it was exciting to know that it was coming, but that did not exist, that I found in the beverage industry, and that was something that I was able to bring into the beverage industry.
Good. And then you continued asking questions, and like me, you didn't like the smell of sunscreen. So you started
Exactly.
looking into that also. I kind of launched your product in sunscreen industry, which was fairly new to you. So there are two questions on that. When do you decide or find out that this is the time to, start looking at something else also, so you can kind of uh, work on two different projects? And how, in your case, did the sunscreen business that you started, did it impact your productivity in Hint, or it kind of accelerated it? What exactly happened?
So I had a scare with skin cancer, and I started to ask why I wasn't wearing sunscreen. And what I realized is that I wasn't wearing sunscreen because I didn't like the smell.
Don't
And
like.
right, and it was very pasty at the time a few years ago. And I really wanted to avoid this ingredient called oxybenzone.
Mhm.
So I decided to see if I could order the ingredients and see if I could actually make something better in my kitchen. I didn't actually think that that product would become a line extension of Hint. What I thought was that I would actually create this product and see what would happen. And it not too dissimilar to what I was doing with Hint water. But when a friend was over one day, and she said, you need to get the FDA approval on this product in order to launch it. And that's when I thought, oh, that'll be fun. I've never done that before. So why don't I go ahead and apply for it. And then they needed a name. And so I put the hint name down just to see whether or not I could actually get the approval. And what I realized pretty quickly when we decided to sell the product online on our Hint website was that this consumer who knew about Hint water was actually open to having us guide them to find other products that kind of followed the logic of what they had bought into with Hint water. So they may not have been thinking about sunscreen. Maybe they had given up on sunscreen as like you just thought, I'm not going to wear it. But when they thought, oh, what is Hint doing now? I really like the water. Maybe I'll give it a try. We weren't even at the beach handing out samples. I mean, we were selling the product, and it was crazy how many people were actually willing to buy a product that had our name on it because there was trust. And I think that the other piece that I realized early on was the story, being able to share with people why I decided to develop Hint sunscreen and what was the story behind it. Because it's a little weird. You're going from water to sunscreen. I mean, people were like, what is going on? I mean, this is crazy. But again, when people saw why I did it, when people it really gave more power to even the water side of it. Maybe there were people that were trying Hint water along for the last few years, and they hadn't really known my story of why I actually started the company. And they were just drinking it, which is great because it was a great product. But when people started to hear about my mission and around the health of how I was really focusing on the consumer overall health, that was a powerful thing. Again, the stories are really what helps the consumer to get sticky with your product, if that is the right term, I guess. And I think stories, that's what stories do for people, whether it's a product like Hint or Richard Branson with Virgin, or Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, whoever it is. I think people want to hear the stories. People want to understand who they're buying products from. And it's a competitive advantage for startups, for younger companies to be able to share their stories of their why, because everybody has a why, right? Maybe your product is not really focused on a mission, but you're trying to solve problems. Share that with the consumer, because that is what they will remember.
And to share your story, you took on to public speaking, and that I recall from the book that when you first time did a speech in public, you were kind of a bit nervous, isn't it? Even after you were very successful by then. Why was that case? I mean, you had already achieved so much. Why speaking in public was making you nervous, and how did that change, and how did that help, really, like speaking in public? How did that help you, uh, maybe growing your business?
Well, I think going out and public speaking just helped us to get more people to understand the backstory of the brand. And again, there were people who were drinking the product already, who maybe they would hear me talk about the brand in a newsletter, or maybe they had been following us and buying from us online. And so they were able to kind of hear from me. But going out to bigger audiences and telling people how I had switched from tech to consumer products, how I had realized that my diet soda was not as healthy as I wanted to be, all the stories that many of them I share in the book as well. Again, it allows the consumer to build trust with the overall brand. And so I thought being able to go out and share that is really my responsibility to the brand, to be able to go out and share those stories. And it was definitely scary the first time when you've got hundreds of people who are staring at you. It's not just one person, or it's not anonymous behind a newsletter. You've got hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people who are sitting in an audience hearing your story. I think it's definitely daunting. But then once you realize that, they're there to actually learn, they're there to be inspired, they're there to laugh with you, not at you, all of those things that I learned about public speaking. It's really exciting. I love to speak now.
Good. And you love to do podcasting also. And that was my question, and a founder and owner of a $1 billion company and even more started her own podcast channel. I just wanted to understand what is the inspiration behind that?
So I actually started it around the same time that I was writing the book, actually, just the notes and 6 years ago. And what I found was that I had many opportunities to talk to other founders, other CEOs, people who were doing incredible things, sometimes hear about their challenges and failures. And so I thought, I wonder if I could start hitting record, of course, asking these people initially to allow me to do that, because I think a lot of other people will learn about their stories. And what I found was that many of these people, maybe some of them had gotten a lot of press, maybe they were getting in Fortune magazine to hear about, their success stories, but some of the challenges along the way, they wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to share that story on
Mm,
CNN or, inside the New York Times, right? That it was just not enough for time for them to really share when things got really scary, when, things they thought they were going to have to close down the business, that what were the things that they really enjoyed doing that maybe they didn't know they would enjoy doing along the way. All of those things are
mm.
the things that I really focus on for my podcast. So actually today, the day that we're recording this, I just launched Seth Goldman, who is the founder and
Yeah, nice.
CEO of Honest Tea, and chairman of Beyond Meat. And now he's got his own another startup. So he's a serial entrepreneur. So all of these learnings that he's learned and how he's changed too. And things that are important to him, and what does he want his legacy to be? All of those things. So it's really exciting. And I don't just focus on the food and beverage industry either. I've talked to Jeff Immelt, who was the CEO of GE. The first question I asked him is, "How do you follow Jack Welch?" I mean, to me, that's daunting in and of itself. I mean, you've got to deal with a whole slew of people that are huge fans, consumers, as well as employees, and you're taking his place, right? How do you do that? How do you lead?
Mm.
Those are all kind of questions that I think people want to know, that for some reason I've always been curious and undaunted to be able to ask those questions of these people, and people really enjoy it. So it's exciting. If you haven't had a chance to listen, it's called the Kara Goldin Show. I
Mhm.
hope you will, and I hope you get a chance to listen to the book on Audible, or purchase the book as well. It's available worldwide.
I've got it already. I've already read it and I loved it. I do watch
Thank you.
your podcast channel also. And it is so true. Not many people are going and asking the CEOs those kind of questions. So it's really adding a lot of value to the people's life and those who are wanting to get into the entrepreneurship. Thank you very much for that, Kara. I can
Thank
talk, and
you.
I'm learning so much from you, and I can talk for another hour. But in the interest of time, I will ask one question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what, according to you, are the top 3 skills that we need in order to be successful, but schools are not teaching?
I think number one, the ability to get outside of your comfort zone. And and by this I mean constantly challenging yourself. So if you feel like you're plateauing in some way, that you are being asked to mentor, that's the time that you need to go back down to the bottom again and start learning for yourself, and finding either that passion or that new idea that you're curious about. And I think that I mean, that sort of encompasses a few different pieces, but I think also never be afraid to go and learn the things that you don't know. So it's always, I think that the idea of being a generalist is something that many schools do not teach. Right? You're either an engineer or you're finance or you're marketing. If you think that any one of those things is not your cup of tea, so to speak, or you don't really understand how to build a business plan because you're a engineer or a marketing executive, go learn it. At least having basic skills and basic appreciation for that allows you to actually be a better colleague, eventually a CEO, somebody who's able to understand those things. And then I think finally, the empathy, right? And really figuring out how your decisions are going to affect other people is something that is really, really critical. So I think that the best leaders, the most successful leaders today are ones that are able to kind of jump outside of the lines a little bit and show empathy for their employees. And when they don't show empathy for their employees, what they're going through, then it ends up coming back to bite them, right? And I think that the major thing that I've learned along the way is being able to see how your actions actually are affecting other people. And I think leading with kindness wraps right into that as well, is something very, very critical in all successful leaders today.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I'll just summarize for my audience once again. Go out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself, learn what you don't know, be a journalist. There is nothing wrong in it. And show empathy and learn to show empathy. Kara, thank you very much. It is so great to talk to you today. And you're such an humble person and so approachable. It's like really, really grateful that I'm having you on my show today. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Guys, if you have not yet done so, please do read the book. Without a doubt, it's a must read. If you want to learn how to bounce back from adverse situation and how to move on when not much is going your way, and most importantly, how not to be stressed out despite having to switch so many hats like Kara does in your personal and professional life, you must read the book. It's got full of real life stories of grit, inspiration, and innovation. And finally, if you have not done so yet, please do consider subscribing to this channel if you've got some value from this. I will see you again. Until then, you take care and keep learning.